Yay, start AI companion. No, thank you. Here we are. We're going to be
You
doing
don't
H.G.
like
Wells
AI
again.
companions.
Well, that's part of the discussion I wanted to bring up with you is the idea of AI, because I've been thinking about that a lot and the difficulties of AI and all. But I'll shelve that because I didn't use the AI companion to help us with talking about AI, so I'm going to skip that. Um,
What
but I
would an
do,
AI companion say about having AI as a companion?
yeah, you got to wonder. Maybe I should ask Siri. She does seem to respond sometimes when I don't even want her to. Just suddenly like gives me material to look at. And you might like this. Yeah, maybe. Maybe I
Yeah,
might like you to shut up.
that's kind of the way I feel about it. I don't really want these suggestions. Can you please go away?
Yeah, right. All right, let's see here. I'm going to see about what is best. What is best for man? How to cook man? How to serve man? Oh boy, how do I do this? Okay, so here we go. We're going to share Mr. H.G. Wells.
Not him again.
Yeah, right. This is the open conspiracy again by Mr. H.G. Wells. And a couple things I was noticing when I was reading through the what do you call it, the introduction. And it says here, as we had mentioned earlier, Wells was a socialist of an empirical, rather vague rationalist type, disliking Marx and unenthusiastic about the managerial socialism of the Webs, which I haven't really studied up much on the Webs, but my understanding from a book I'm reading on the rise of socialism is that they were one branch of the Socialist Party in England. So I may be, mistaken on that. Feel free to correct me if you want.
No, 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 you actually are quite correct.
Yeah.
Thinking about that sentence, it suggests to me that he disliked anybody that had power,
Oh,
except
okay.
him.
Well, his branch, of course, was the Fabians, and then they kicked him out for being a womanizer. So there's that.
Too.
But I did not recognize that he disliked Marx. I don't know if that's a personal thing. Probably not, because Marx probably was dead by then. But he probably didn't like Marx's way of doing things and writing. I suspect that's what that means.
Well, Marx is deeply unconvincing and sounds um, really unappealing. Indeed, I've never really understood why so many people wanted to say, "Oh, let's follow Marx," because when you actually read what he says, it's so bizarre, ugly,
Yes.
unpleasant.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to say this as if I'm sounding like I'm praising him, but Lenin was far more convincing.
Yeah, he was much more of a rhetorician, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And others after him that followed were they were much more eloquent in their persuasive powers to talk about socialism and Marxism too. So it's interesting why that 1848 right work became the manifesto that everybody turns to. Maybe it just was a the best sort of coalescing of the ideas of the socialists. Maybe I'm not really sure.
Maybe it wasn't the first. It was the first written in English.
Yeah, maybe
Maybe
that's what it
that's
was.
why.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's what it was. Yeah, and
But I don't
galvanized a lot
actually
of
know why
people.
Wells didn't like Marx. I'm just speculating that it was the
Yeah,
fact that he was offensive,
yeah,
vulgar.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Certainly, Wells is much more. He's a much more refined intellectual type. It
Hmm.
seems to me, anyway. And then it's interesting. I was noting here that he published this in 28. And when I was doing some research for C.S. Lewis's work, Out of the Silent Planet, that was published in 38, 10 years later. And some things that were happening around the 37, you already had the rise of the Nazi Party there in the National Socialist Party there in Germany by that time, and you also had the wreck of the Hindenburg in 37, and you had oh, what else was it? Two encyclicals basically that were writing against socialism and communism at the time. So it was real. This is a real hotbed of thought at this time about socialism and about National Socialism, call it communism, whatever. So this whole document must have been something of a manifesto in and of itself, I would suspect. I like what they say here at the end too, that Wells is attempting to answer the question, what should socialists actually do? And he confessed several times to having no very clear idea. Great.
That didn't stop him from saying lots on the topic.
Yeah, maybe that's part of that may be part of my problem with this whole project. This whole project is like, what should socialists do? Well, we don't really know. Well, then why don't you shut the hell up? You know?
36
Um,
chapters later.
yeah, right, exactly. I don't know. It seems like a lot of people that want to fix everybody else's life don't actually know what they're doing, and they're making it up as they go along.
As if they're
Like,
experimenting on it.
yeah,
We've seen that in our
yeah,
age
yeah.
last few years. It's
Like
like,
we have indeed.
did you
We have
see
indeed.
that thing just a couple of days ago, in fact, about the two bioethicists from the University of Michigan who feel that it would be a good idea to genetically engineer ticks to spread the disease alpha gal so that people can't eat red meat anymore? That's an experiment. Why do they feel that it's a great idea to experiment on that particular kind of thing?
Well, I can understand the rationale, but that's the sort of thing where I just want to smack somebody.
Well,
The rationale makes sense. Okay, when I was studying logic, there was that idea that you can be correct but untrue, right? You
sure.
can be correct and true, you can be incorrect and untrue, and you can be correct and untrue. Hard to be incorrect and true, but there it is. But anyway, like to be correct and untrue means that you all from the logical premises that you have, you make the correct conclusions. But your conclusions don't actually match with reality,
Mm.
right? And that's what a lot of this seems to me to be because it's based upon ideas that fundamentally are flawed. So like these guys with the ticks, right? And I swear, every time I hear this, I think, okay, why don't you be the first to experiment on it? Why don't you go? You go first. You go first, Mr. Fauci or whatever it is. Um, these guys with the ticks. The fundamental premise is what? The fundamental premise is that eating meat is bad and that our planet is going to be destroyed because either because of too many cows and they're farting, or because we're going to deplete the cows and eat the meat, or else because it's sinful in a sort of quasi-religious way, like this most recent eulogy that was held for chickens in a Whole Foods market or something. All these people that gathered together to hold this terrible, you know, requiem mass for the chickens that were dead. That sort of thing. Whatever the case, it's based on false premises, so that somebody's deciding in an almost religious way that they're going to spread their religious fervor to other people, willy or nilly, whether those other people want that.
It's the same religious fervor they have it's the same people, in fact, who are trying to impose the socialist experiment.
Oh, sure. Absolutely it is. Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah. It's like the people that want to, the Canadian wildfires, right? The people that want to blot out the suns that can cool the planet. Great, good, marvelous, fantastic, excellent. Yeah. Or the let's deplete the population thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, not
yeah.
fun. Well, whatever the
Poor
case.
idea.
Yeah, whatever the case. This whole thing, like how is this different from, say, Lysenkoism? Where we've got this great idea, it's gonna work. We just have to plant the plants next to each other and they'll share resources. Yay. Next thing you know, you got the Holodomor, and millions of people dying. Oh, gee whiz. Well, we didn't know what we were doing. We were just experimenting. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah.
We just didn't try true socialist agriculture.
Yes, right. True socialist agriculture. Yeah, where everybody shares everything. There was like if I remember right, there was a supermarket that just recently closed because it couldn't keep things on its shelves because it was doing that socialist experiment where it was free food for everybody.
Mhm.
And some things would actually rot on the shelves because no one wanted them, and others were stripped bare on a regular basis. And they had to close finally because they just, between the fruit flies and the depleted shelves, they just couldn't stay open. Imagine that.
Yeah, I actually saw that story too. Think it was in St. Louis. It was supposed to be one of these city-run community grocery stores, but they didn't seem to grasp that there's a reason why certain things get purchased and made available for the customer and certain things don't. And that
Yep.
there's a very strong overlap between what the customer wants and what the grocery store purchases.
Yeah, it's kind of like this guy Adam Smith, right? I think he wrote something
He
like
wrote
that,
something like
right?
that. Yeah, yeah, he was
Yeah.
Scottish.
Yeah, well, he was Scottish. That's true. Yeah, what were the movies we were just talking about, right? The Man in the White Suit and the what was the name of the other one
The
with
Peter
Peter
Sellers.
Sellers? Anyway, I forget what it was. But those are, they're great, funny critiques of this sort of situation where you've got, on the one hand, Alec Guinness running around with the perfect suit, and he gets pursued by all these companies that want to destroy him because he's going to ruin their businesses. And then you've got the other one with Peter Sellers who wants to give free food to everybody and causes riots, and the companies pursue him because he's depleting the value of their product. It's like, man, anytime you attempt this crap, it's going to end very, very poorly.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I just thought that was interesting. So we go to the section on religion though, because that's where I wanted to pick
Okay.
up tonight, if you don't mind. And we
Now,
left off last time with talking about religion in the New World. Yeah. And Mr. Wells begins by embodying his readers and saying, yes, but like, yes to what? Yes, but does not our religion tell us what we are to do with our lives? See, this again, you had said earlier that
always starts
Wells
with straw man.
misunderstands religion.
He does. He always starts with these straw man arguments. That's not what people mean when they
Yeah,
say it.
yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
And it's this idea that somehow religion is going to dictate every facet of your life. It's like, yeah, no. But anyway, Wells goes on, we have to bring religion as its fundamental matter into this discussion. From our present point of view, religion is that central, essential part of education which determines conduct. Well, yeah, sort of.
No, it's not.
I mean, you go
Religion
first.
certainly should tell us what to do with our lives.
Yeah, I should.
It's not an education thing at all. This is something that the doctor of the church, John Henry Newman, was pointing out, is that education does not bring virtue to you at all. It can't be done. And
Yeah,
he is setting it up in so many words to say that, well, we will educate to get a virtuous way of how you should live your life.
right,
That's not right.
right.
In the first place, that is not right. That's not true.
Yeah, and that goes back to Platonic ideas and Aristotle. Both Aristotle and Plato were in agreement, as far back as the fifth century Athens, that you can't teach virtue. You could teach the methods, you can teach the forms, you can teach the potential outcomes, but virtue can't be taught. Aristotle says it can be you can train certain activities so they're in accord with virtue, in accord with the good, but religion is not. That's not religion.
No, it's not. And it doesn't require Christian viewpoints to understand this. It just requires you to look at what actually happens with
Yeah.
people. Um,
Yes, it does somewhat betray a myopic British Protestant fallen away vision that Wells would say something like this, doesn't it? Um,
it
whereas
does something
other,
only a very, very rich and privileged person could think
yeah,
through.
yeah, because when he says religion certainly should tell us what to do with our lives, what religion is he talking about? He's talking about white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism, no, normally. I mean, like Shintos, for instance. The Shinto does not believe that his religion is telling him what to do with his life, right? The Buddhist doesn't believe that it's telling you what to do with your life. The Buddhist believes actually that you have to understand these koans in order to make your life devoid of passion.
No, it's a way of in both those cases is a way of how to order yourself so that you are in accord with the world.
Yeah,
Um,
right, right.
and truthfully, so is a right understanding of Christianity.
Sure.
How to order yourself so that you are in harmony.
So he starts off, talking about starting off with a false premise. He starts off with a false premise of saying this is what religion should be doing, that this is the point of the kernel of religion.
Well, his
Um,
version of religion doesn't involve actually believing in God at any point.
yeah, no, it isn't. It's really more of a social control mechanism than anything, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, and even with
Which
your
actually, you know what? That's straight out of Marx. No matter how much he says he hates it, that is right out of Marx.
yeah, it really is. It is, and I would press the issue to say it's as far back as the nominalist view of religion too. I think the nominalists probably saw or at least ended up seeing religion as being a social control mechanism. Because otherwise, what purpose would it serve? It seems absolutely ridiculous, given that stance, right? To the believer, it's not ridiculous at all, but to somebody who's outside, who only sees it as materialism, to do certain things in religion, it's just stupid and silly. Like, okay, for instance, let's go back to the founding of Judaism. I'm going to make you a chosen people, right? You're going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. You have to do this little mutilation of your private parts, and then you're going to be castigated by every person around the globe, and you will be in poverty most of your life, and you'll have these 10 rules you have to follow. And you can't eat all this good, luxurious food either. Wow, that sounds great, Lord. Sign me up.
Yeah, I don't think it worked that way.
It's like this is really strange. I've always found it amusing, almost to me, the way that Judaism, the beautiful religion that it is, has at its heart these sort of elements that are almost comical.
Yeah, it's like that sketch that we saw is like, so when do we get rewarded? Here's the great thing. You don't.
You don't.
You're going to be murdered
Yes.
brutally,
Yeah.
persecuted for the rest of your life.
Mel Brooks carrying the 15 commandments down the hill. I bring you 15, crash. 10 commandments. Yeah, and I think he's really mischaracterizing the very nature of real religion here by reducing it to nothing more than that.
Believer. Because he is not a believer, he does not understand those who are. And he is by no means the only person about whom that can be said.
Yeah.
I see that these days in America, people that have nothing to do with the political right automatically assume that you're only dealing with people that hate women and want to destroy the environment and wish. But if you actually talked to anyone,
Yeah, right.
I think that
Right.
was.
Yeah, and then the immediate
talks to people that really truly did believe.
Yeah. It's a bit like misunderstanding a jeans commercial, I suppose.
That has been the funniest controversy.
I'm just it's like it's popcorn city, it's just wonderful to watch. Yeah. Yeah, and that point of being an outsider looking in really comes up in these next sentences where he says the vast stir and occasions of modern life, so much of what we call religion remains irrelevant or dumb. He's writing off immediately certain things that in the modern world seem irrelevant or seem dumb, like stupid, like I said before. Because as an outsider, someone standing outside religion, yes, they are dumb. Why would you sit there while some guy lifts up a piece of bread, Why would you wear little curls around the sides of your head?
And if the central problem you're trying to face is how to lay electrical wires to a small town so that they can have a hospital,
Or
religion's not going to tell you how to lay the wires. It won't tell you how to organize a grocery store such that the shelves don't go rotten or completely bare.
In fact, you may get in the way. You may get in the way. I mean, for instance, let's take not just Christianity or Judaism. If you are religious about the land, you don't want a highway being made right through the center of Stonehenge.
All right, there you go.
The spirits will be disturbed, and I'm not saying this pejoratively or humorously. I think there is something seriously to be taken into consideration about that. Not just because some people still believe it, but because they might believe in something really real.
Well,
but if you're thinking about building a highway, then it's stupid.
Yes, that was the point I was about to make. If your only concern is making the highway, I'm sorry, these stupid rocks have been in the way for 6,000 years.
Yeah. And they're just sitting there. Nobody ever does anything with them. These giant pieces of granite or whatever they were. They're not granite though. They're like bluestone. What is it? What is the material?
The central ones are bluestone.
Bluestone, yeah.
Form of granite. The outer ones, I actually don't remember what they're made out of.
Yeah. Anyway, just move them out of the way. Get a bulldozer.
Yeah.
Religion does not seem to join on to the main parts of the general problem of living. Religion. Yeah, right. Yeah. Really?
Sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought too, isn't it? Because, okay, just take Catholicism for a minute. Yeah, they don't join on to the idea that you should euthanize any races that are lesser. That's strange how they do that. You know, they don't really
Mhm.
cotton to this idea of free abortion for everybody so you can kill your children. And, you know, they don't really get into this whole idea of just being able to make love to anything you want. You know, it's just strange the way that they just don't join on to that.
No, they don't. But notice that he has once again said that things like that are the general problem of living.
Uh-huh.
That's what he
Uh-huh.
says they are. I already don't agree with him on this point.
Uh-huh. Yes. But
I mean, don't
he,
get me wrong. I do understand that when one goes to work in one's chemistry lab or building a house, religion doesn't really help you particularly on that point. But
mhm.
is that the general problem of living, or is it just how am I going to do my job?
And also, yes,
You
absolutely. And
know?
also it's is that the problem of religion or is that the problem of the modern world? Because either the
Very
modern
good
world is
point.
kind of
Very
screwed
good
up
point.
or religion is screwed up, right?
I would say that anything that's put them all into their separate little boxes and
Is
kept them totally separate from each other, is screwed up because it
yeah,
gets myopic.
yeah. Yes. Well, Wells takes a stance that religion has lost touch. It has lost
Yeah, so
touch, I
just cut
suppose,
that
lost
box,
touch with
cut that box away.
humanity.
What
Yeah,
was I
right,
just saying
exactly.
about myopic when he says this?
Yeah. So he goes on to say, let us try and bring this problem of the open conspiracy to me to make the new world into relation with the traditions of religion. So we're gonna take the traditions of religion and we're gonna fuse it into this open conspiracy of remaking the new world or the new world order. The clear-minded open conspirator, who has God as modern ideology, has lucidly arranged account of the universe in order. I just love this. Open, clear-minded, lucid. Yeah, okay. Lucidly arranged account of the universe in order is obliged to believe that only by giving his life to the great processes of social reconstruction and shaping his conduct with reference to that can he do well with his life. Hmm.
He likes to use a lot of big words and subordinate clauses. That sentence is mostly meaningless, though.
Yeah, what do you think it means?
Well,
What do you think it means?
the gist of what he's saying is that an open conspirator is smarter than everyone else, and to make sure that they give their life to make the world come under the control of the conspiracy.
Yes, yeah, that's what I got too. That somebody who is a modern gives their life over to this social reconstruction, and everything he does or she does should be geared towards shaping their conduct to reference to this social reconstruction, right? And only that will provide a good life.
And by the way, please notice how incredibly narrow that viewpoint is. That it is a person that only goes towards this, nothing else. And I say that because what he says next is describing exactly the opposite. Go on and read the
Mhm.
next part, and you'll see how he's praising these people as if they were doing it from a broader viewpoint. It's not,
Yep.
it's a narrower one.
So this person who gives himself over to the great processes of social reconstruction merely launches him into the most subtle and unending of struggles. The struggle against the incessant gravitation of our interests to ourselves. So I thought that was a very striking line because even today we see this constant idea that the struggle is not over. We have struggle sessions because we're never fully achieving the new world. We're never achieving the perfect society. We have to constantly struggle, find enemies of the state, root them out, find causes, find social justice programs, and constantly engage in this thing. And in some ways, it does give a certain meaning to life because you get up every day and you think, well, what can I protest today, or where can I find injustices today, or what dead chickens can I mourn today? So you're constantly looking for something new that will revivify you. But it says it is an unending struggle.
Well,
And it is a struggle primarily against incessant gravitation of our interests to ourselves. I take that to mean that it's an internal struggle.
this is also a philosophical justification for a life of endless war.
Yeah.
No peace. The idea that it has to be an endless struggle, that is an
Hmm.
endless war. You
Yep.
sure you want to have people that only want war.
It's a Dar
Wh-
al-Harb.
Whether it be war against yourself or not, if you've decided that everything in the world has to be war,
Yep.
that is what you'll get. And
Do you
war
remember
is good.
Do you remember Godfrey Reggio's great trilogy of Poakatsi and Koyaanisqatsi and Nakoikatsi?
I think I read
If
that.
you haven't seen that, an audience, if you haven't seen that, I recommend it, but it's very difficult to watch because there's no plot. It's like looking at a painting, a moving painting. It's a movie with music by Philip Glass. Koyaanisqatsi is the first one. The term is Navajo. It means life out of balance. The second one, Poakatsi, means the life of the machine, I think. Yeah, it's a ghost in a machine idea, basically. And the third one, Nakoikatsi, means the life of war. And it's exactly what you're talking about, what Wells is talking about here. And of course, Godfrey Reggio was completely against all this. This is not a yay, we're in the state of war, isn't that great? This is a horrible thing. And here it is presented in such a way that you can see just how horrible it is. And when you get to it, again, it's difficult to get through. So you have to be prepared to not look for plot or character. You're just watching patterns. But by the time you get to Nakoikatsi, what he shows is he shows the production of tanks and microchips and robotics and guns and this constant like production of means of destroying other human beings. It's a really amazing piece of material because you see a lot of these production lines you wouldn't see otherwise, and it's incessant. It's almost an hour and 50 minutes, almost 2 hours. So it's constant scenes of this life of war in a state of war. It's very much what is being professed here, I think, by Wells, is that you are in a constant state of war, a constant state of struggle. And that's a good thing, it seems like Wells suggests, because it keeps you going.
Most people that like war either have no experience of it at all or else they are monsters.
Yeah, yeah. And those that stir people up to war, like warlocks, it's a form of necromancy, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
No, I can't approve of this viewpoint that it's an unending struggle that the right sort of person has to engage in because unending struggle is an awful thing. There needs to be peace and time to regrow everything.
yeah, well, what's that line from Tolkien, right? That something to the effect of the warrior doesn't love the blade for itself. He
Mhm.
loves what he's defending.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where his whole notion of religion again is wrong.
Yeah.
Because if you are rightly
Yeah.
orienting yourself with God and the world, the right orientation has brought you to peace, not
Right.
to further
Exactly.
war.
Well, this is what I think this is getting right at the crux of what Wells is trying to say here. Um, he suggests that somebody in this great struggle for the process of social reconstruction, which is the project that the New World Order, the progressives, are undergoing, social reconstruction. This person has to, as he says, live the broad life and escape from the close, narrow life. The broad life is the vision of the New World Order. The close, narrow life is my personal desire to have a little garden, or my personal desire to have a woman, or my personal desire to be happy with my children and my job. That's very narrow. And you have to give that up for the broader vision of social justice and equity, right? We all try to attain the dignity and happiness of magnanimity and escape from the tormenting urgencies of personal desire. In the past, that struggle has generally assumed the form of religious struggle. Religion is the antagonist of self. So again, yes, I see you shaking your head. Again, he's missing the damn point. But his conception is that
Also making me crack up.
religion is a social control mechanism, but it's a social control mechanism wherein one struggles to overcome one's what is it? Tormenting urgencies of personal desire in
Mhm.
order to attain the dignity and happiness of magnanimity. Sort of a converting tool or a device that by doing certain ablutions and saying certain ululations, you'll somehow reach magnanimity. That's what religion's all about. That
I
is
don't,
contra Marx. I got to say, that's contra Marx, just for the record. See, Marx, and you probably know this, but Marx saw that religion was a social control tool that basically pacified people so that they did not recognize the gravity of their situation. They did not think that they could actually rise up against their situation and improve it. So for him, religion was all about doping up people so they didn't object to stuff. And for Wells, it seems like religion is this struggle to overcome those personal desires and bring them into the realm of much greater ideas and desires and struggles. Therefore, religion is the antagonist of the self. Okay. There is some merit to what he's saying, but the merit is like a heretical merit, as Hilaire Belloc points out, right? Heresy is like a magnification of a kernel of truth. I think that in religion, in most religions, there is this sense of trying to bring someone to maturity. And that goes way back. The Iliad, for instance, talks about this, and the Eleusinian mysteries talk about this, which is that it's an abnegation of the self, or the subordination of the self, in order that the self can be, what is the term? Exalted to the level of holiness, so exalted to the level of godliness. Apotheosized, that's the word. Apotheosized. And there is some truth to that. Yes.
All right.
But what he does next is prestidigitation of the worst kind. Because he's saying here that this is what religion does. Most people can nod their heads and say, yeah, I recognize that, I recognize that, I recognize that. And what he's trying to do ultimately is to fuse religion with this conspiracy, with this new social order. And how can you
Well,
reconcile the one with the other?
just a couple of paragraphs ago, he was talking about how the open conspirators need to take the traditions of religion. And that is what he's talking about here, is the traditions of it for conversion of the self, so that the self is instead ordained towards the great public order.
Right. Right. Because that's the ultimate goal that Wells is
We
pointing out.
had this theme before. He doesn't mean the same thing by these words that
No.
you and I and others would have meant when he's
Right.
talking about this as a form of a personal struggle, um, or even great subordinations of the self that he says later on. This is not the same thing that the older doctors of the church would have meant
No,
when they used the same words.
not at all. No,
It's
it's not
the
at
same
all.
thing that's meant that he who would live must first die for me. Um, that means something different.
Right. But it's also important to note that it's like the Chinese national church, right? It seems to serve the need in people to have religion. And it does all the things similar to what the Catholic Church does. But in essence, it's a mechanism of social control and a conduit for information to the state. And what he suggests in the paragraphs that follow is that what we need to do is to co-opt these traditions, basically, to make them so that they are, what you said, saying the same thing, but meaning something radically different. Yeah, that's an interesting thought there too, because this has been proposed in a great deal of current situations. There are some orders that may go perhaps unnamed, but they look traditional. They act traditional. They talk traditional.
There are a number of orders like that. They are indeed legion in their number.
They are indeed legionario. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And in much the same way, they seem to be a wolf that wears sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
Um, and I worry sometimes that that's not the only one, although that does seem to be one of the prominent ones. There seem to be others as well. And I would even go so far to say as things like the Church of England right now is something like that.
Yeah.
Because what Wells proposes seems to have taken root. And what is it now, 2025? Almost 100 years after this was written now, you know,
It's interesting. Yeah, we're all
90, 97 years.
century mark.
100 years later, his ideas are coming to well, they're coming to roost or whatever. So yeah, let's look at what he has to say here further. In their completeness, he says, in the life that was professionally religious, religions have always demanded great subordinations of self. So he's developing that idea. Therein lay their creative force. That's not true, but again, that's he's interesting and he's wanting to do history, but he wants to do history as a way of getting his view across rather than looking at how things actually developed. The creative force of religions was not subordination of self. Over and over again, going as far back as Karnak, I would think, and the Egyptian religions, it seems like the creative force was an infusion of a vision of beauty and order and structure, which other people wanted to participate in, seems to me.
Well, is that, by the way, I've got to tell you that it clearly has to go back much, much further than that, because there are some Neolithic things in England that were built over the course of something like 500 to 1,000 years of generations nonstop. I think it's Maze Howe is one of the places
Ooh,
built 500 to 1,000 years. People just never stopped doing it.
wow.
They weren't stupid. They wanted to participate in this great act of making this thing.
Yeah. It's
And
almost like it's
we have to be
inherent in
just
human nature.
by this point to the fact that he will intersperse statements of fact which are quite correct with stuff that he then just makes up. Therein lay their creative
Yes.
force. No,
Yeah.
you just made that up.
Clever gal. Yeah. It's almost like there's something inherent, intrinsic to human nature that we are a religious creature. And we want to participate in this great religious order that seems to be around us in some way. It's not just the demand for great subordination of self. They demanded, there's that word again. They demanded devotion and gave reasons for that demand. They disentangled the will from the egotistical preoccupations, often very completely. Which again, yes and no. I mean, over and over again, religions are all saying, grow up, become a part of this bigger thing, stop being such a child, this is the pattern of life. But yeah, the demanding, the disentangling, yes.
And I distrust anyone that needs to use a lot of syllables.
Yes, I me too.
Okay, but go ahead.
Mongol no like big words.
It's not that I'm stupid, it's the fact that if they're doing this, it suggests to me that they're trying to confuse their audience.
Yeah, there does seem to be a great deal of that. I mean, imagine being just your average bloke, right? Who goes down to the
Oh,
pub
have I
after
disentangled my
church.
will from egotistical preoccupations?
Yeah, sounds pretty good to me.
Oh,
There's no such thing as a self-contained religion, Benjamin, a private religious solo.
isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, I guess. If he means what I mean, then yes.
We'd
Certain
have to
forms
talk
of
about that. Go ahead,
what's that?
I would say we'd have to talk about that because I can think on under certain interpretations of those words. Yes, there are some very private religious
Yeah,
moments.
it really the point that he's making is to join us or die.
Yeah.
But what he fails to recognize is that religio is a tying together. That's what the word means. You're being tied together. So the individual person becomes tied to a reality that they cannot deny after they've seen it. That's what the individual religion is. And it is a very private thing. It's so private that remember that in our family, you didn't talk about politics or religion at the dinner table, right? It's like talking about your sex life at the dinner table. You just don't do it.
By the way, he talks about his sex life right after this point, if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah, he seems to enjoy telling people about that. Like, thank you, Mr. Wells. I don't know if I need that visual. Go back to your disentangling your libido or whatever it was. But the other, you're tied individually to some great, beautiful, complex thing. And then you're also tied to a community by the people that also are engaged in this activity of worship. So you're tied in two ways, really. Well, you're tied in two ways. It's strange. It's almost like a cross. You're tied in two ways, and that's what religio means: is being tied to, like a ligament. So there is a private religious solo. Absolutely, there is. But in terms of looking at sort of the thing of religion, you're looking at something which is very much a communal thing in the Anglo-Saxon sense of the word thing, right? You can't have a thing by yourself, you know.
No, you can't in the Anglo-Saxon term of it.
You have to go to
That
the
is, if I
thing with
recall
others.
correctly, it's a gathering of people in order to discuss the ideas and decide what the right course of action should be. Isn't that what
That's exactly right.
the thing is?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, and that's why you could say that religion is a public thing, because public thing is almost like a, what do you call it? It's redundant, you know. Certain forms of Protestantism and some mystical types come near to making religion secluded duet between the individual and his divinity, but here that may be regarded as a perversion of the religious impulse. Sure, just throw that out there. Those guys are just perverse and jerks, so we're not going to talk about them. Okay. Just as the normal sexual complex excites and stirs
Sexual?
the individual. He didn't waste any time on that one.
Oh,
Just as the normal sexual complex excites and stirs the individual out of his egotism to serve the ends of the race.
oh yeah, that's what I'm thinking about when I see
It's
Sydney Sweeney. I'm
like,
thinking, ooh, baby, nice jeans. How about the ends of the
yes.
race?
Sydney Sweeney, we need to serve the ends of the race. What is a line of the Mormon Pride and Prejudice where he gets down on his knees, Mr. Collins, and he says, Jane, I've been ordered by God to repopulate the earth. Like, yeah, great pickup line. All right, anyway, so
Serve the ends of the race. Yes, yes, yes.
you have to serve the ends of the race. So the normal religious process, because religion is like sex, here it's a similar business, takes the individual out of his egotism for the service of the community.
What kind of religion are we talking about here? Actually,
Yeah.
better not answer that. I still have my
No,
mind.
yeah, don't go there. I think that this is interesting to hear that again, the individual serves the community because he or she has had a religious experience. You don't have the religious experience be, in order to serve the community.
Correct.
Subtle but important.
Yeah.
Well, it says this is
Or
not a
the
bargain.
reason I'm just going to point out, because there are some people that have tried to serve the community in order to get that deep religious experience. They always wind up being very, very frustrated because it never happens.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you also get overwhelmed because part of the religion thing is recognizing that you're not the God, you're not Christ. When you want to fix the world or save the world or be the Christ, you inevitably end up becoming the Mephistopheles, I think. So it is not a bargain. Religion is not a bargain. A social contract between the individual and the community. It's not a social contract. That's
I'm
Rousseau.
with them. I agree. It's not.
Yeah, yeah, I agree too. It is a subordination of both the existing individual and the existing community in relation to something, a divinity, a divine order, a standard, a righteousness, more important than either the individual or the existing community.
Subordination.
Well, that's an interesting choice of words, subordination. Yeah, yes and no. I mean, both the individual and the community have to recognize that they're not the God, right?
All
I will
right.
be
In
your
that
God, you'll be
sense,
my people.
yes. Subordination, if that's what's meant by it. Yeah.
But again, that's thinking also in terms of a machine-like mentality. The what he misses is that both the individual and the communities that make up, the individuals that make up the community, are not just subordinating themselves. This is not inshallah Allah. They are they are saved by the divine. They're filled with the Holy Spirit of the divine.
Correct
They
word I
are
think would have been
made a
transformed.
community. Sorry, what?
The correct word, as I think about it, would not be subordination, but transformation. A
Transformation.
transformation of both the
Yeah.
existing individual and the existing community in relation to something.
Yes.
Divinity, a divine order, standard righteousness, more important than either. Transformation is the word that should be used there.
Yeah. Transformation. Yeah. Transfiguration almost, right? It's almost There's that wonderful thing in the Mass, which sometimes is said now, it's not said all the time, but the priest says, by this water and wine, can we come to share in your divinity who suffered yourself to share in our humanity? That's a wonderful little phrase, because what it really is suggesting is that the incarnation that debased itself to be part of the sweat and toil of human existence, by doing so, allowed human beings to participate in the infinite, which is a mind-boggling concept. There was something I was looking at at Jewish Kabbalism the other day to study that a little bit, and the Jewish star, the inverted triangles, is a representation of a concept where, if I get this right, from the perspective of the created beings, or the subordinate, the worlds below the infinite, all creation occurs out of nothing into something. Out of nothing into something. From ayin to yesh, I think is the term in Jewish. I think ayin is nothingness and yesh is something, but I might get them flipped. But from the perspective of the divine, all creation is actually from something to nothing. In other words,
I don't understand. I'm sorry.
We think that there's nothing, and then let there be light, and then all the other things that were created. But from the divine perspective, that's not the case. There was something that started it all, the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. And there's not a creation of a nothingness. There is a receding or a covering over of the light that allowed for other things to further manifest. So you actually, creation is, from that perspective, is not from nothing to something. It's from something, and then a receding that creates what looks like a nothing, but it's a darkening or a receding. So that in Jewish Kabbalistic thought, creation is actually a hiding, a veiling, or a darkening of the infinite light to greater and greater proportions, until you get to matter itself, which is I think the most darkened, I suppose, of the receding of the light. And so you're looking at either from nothingness down to somethingness, or you're looking at from I'm sorry, I'm not showing this, somethingness down to the nothingness that allows for the creation of other things.
Got it. Hence the two overlaid triangles.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm trying to get at in a very stumbling way here, very halting way here. But it's a very interesting concept, because most of us as creative beings can't see that second form. We see ayin to yesh, we see nothing to something. The creation ex nihilo. What we don't see is we don't see that there could be an infinite something which then veils itself in order that other things can come into existence. The Or Ein Sof diminishes so that the created world can increase. Like John says, right? I must diminish so that he can increase. Or the Or Ein Sof steps aside so that other creations can have their limelight, their time in the sun, so to speak, their big moment. And that's not, that is a transfiguration or transformation, which is a beautiful exchange, a beautiful community. But it's not subordination. It's not that things are made slavish.
The thing that I must point out about what you're saying, because of course I very much enjoyed learning this from you from just this moment too, is that also has nothing to do with creating a system throughout the world of how people are to govern themselves. It is more purely religious.
Yes.
Than
Yeah.
all of this struggle to make order that is the open conspiracies idea.
Right. Well, yeah, it is.
It is a thing that is inconceivable to
Yeah.
the people that say, oh, the only purpose of religion is to bring about this order.
Well, what you just said, that concept is a very simplistic way of looking at religion, I gotta say. So Wells, for all his big words, is really kind of a simpleton when it comes to this, because he hasn't really wrestled with some of these big concepts.
Or That was
Um,
the themes that you and I talked about in an earlier episode, as I recall.
yeah, he's really dope when it comes down to it. Just a dope with a British accent. But the whole word religio being tied to something also calls up a very old concept, which we see in the image of the chain of being in Plato, um, the tree of life, Yggdrasil, all these different images of a chain descending from the infinite to the finite, which is like a ligament. It's a tie. It's a line that ties everything to it. And so what religion in its best form really is a recognition that that's a reality and that you are part of that and you're tied to it. You are tied not just to a place on the earth, though that's part of it. I mean, most religions were like, we are the people of this city, but it's also tied to a greater thing, which is a vertical tie, which is the tie to that great chain of being, that great line. This I don't know if you can see this if I switch this real quick. This idea of the tree of life.
Well, I've seen this, yes. I was reading
Yeah.
this earlier.
And this is part of the Jewish Kabbalism. But see, the thing of it is, this was formalized in the 13th century, if I'm not mistaken. I think was the first like formal way of drawing it. But it harkens back really, really, really way back. I would take it back to Karnak. It's probably older than that. Karnak has it in the image of the seed and the flower of life. This is like a form of that, and actually fits right onto the flower of life, which I don't know. Can I call that up really quick? Um, the flower of life comes from the seed of life and gives birth to the tree of life, was the concept. Here it is. Well, that's kind of cool. What is that? Vibrating. So
Don't
this
click on shiny
flower of
things.
life, what's that? I don't know what that is. It's
Don't
kind of
click
cool.
on shiny things.
Ah! Trippy, man. Wow. I have to download that. This is the flower of life, which proceeds from a simpler model, which is the seed of life. And into this, you can fit the tree of life, which is this business here.
Yes.
Okay. So really, Jewish mysticism is not original in the sense that it developed in the 1200s or 1000s or whatever. It's really tapping into something much older. But the idea being that from the Or Ein Sof, which is the infinite light, the Or Ein Sof is a consciousness, and it recedes at some point, thus creating time and space. And in that time and space are these manifestations, which are really, they're not manifestations as much as they are further darkenings where the light recedes a little bit more and you get something that comes into existence, so to speak. And the first is this crown, the Kether. And I'm not sure, Chokmah, I don't remember what the definitions are for everything here, but I think that Chokmah is wisdom and Binah is the nothingness, the empty space. So here, this is the crown, which is the first manifestation, and then you have this entrance into nothingness and wisdom at the same time, and the divine will basically creates these other things, these other forms called Sephiroth. The Sephiroth or the Seph, what is it in plural? Sephiroth or something like that. The word Sephiroth, interestingly enough, too, is another form of the word sphere. It's related to sphere. So we're not talking two-dimensional, we're talking a three-dimensional object here. And if you can imagine this three-dimensional object with these nodules that appear on it at regular intervals, especially extending way down, because this is just extending into this realm here, the Malkuth, which is matter itself. It's extended in this image of what's called Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon is the first sort of recognizable anthropomorphic image that occurs in the start of this chain or this tree. And I'm looking for, yeah, it was normally depicted as a human being, Adam Kadmon, endless or eternal man. It's a term which was also popular even in Greek philosophy or Greek theology. So Philo talks about it, for instance. And of Adam Kadmon, there are these first four worlds of manifestation that occur. The four worlds in some way correspond to the four couples of deities that first push up the mountain of wisdom on the sea of placidity in Egyptian thought. So in other words, you've got something really, really old, a philosophy that's really, really old, talking about how matter is connected to divinity or metaphysical existence. And if it's three-dimensional, I don't know. This my poor science mind comes to mind first, and I'm starting to see something that looks kind of like a DNA strand, you know? And I mean, not exactly, obviously, but part of what I was thinking on is when Watson and Crick go to find out what the structure of the DNA is, you have to correct me on this. They don't actually see the DNA. They hypothesize how the four different elements interact with one another and what the best structure would be. Is that correct?
That is actually correct. It is.
Can we now, using microscopy, actually see a DNA strand?
It depends on what you mean by it. Yes, you can see a probability um, boundary that does in fact show DNA in its shape. You can't
Okay.
see an atom at all. It's at a level of smallness where light and position, like a thing's actual position, loses its meaning when it gets that small. So you can't see it there
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's only a probability of it being there.
That's a good analogous thought, because I was thinking that the atom has itself undergone various iterations of the structure as we've learned more and more about the interaction of these forces. So the current model of the atom is very different from the original atom that I grew up with the sphere and the rotating
Yeah,
moons.
always a good picture, but no, that one
Yeah,
is
it doesn't work. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
even vaguely accurate.
So I guess what I'm getting at is when Watson and Crick go to create their model, I know that they did it primarily by what worked, so what seemed to be practical, what solved the problems that they were wrestling with. I remember this from the DNA book that I think James Watson wrote.
Yeah,
But this is strange. Is it possible that the models for creating the DNA were at all influenced by a culture that had this sort of thing in it?
I do know the answer to that. And the answer is not directly. It was
Yes.
influenced only in the sense that they walked into it with this axiomatic belief that there would be certain rules that had to govern how things are structured relative to one another.
Interesting, interesting.
Now, the
Yeah.
Kabbalists, hundreds of years before that, um, said that that was true at the spiritual level.
Yes.
I do think that the Kabbalists are limited in that they saw it as a way of control.
Yes.
And that is, of course, very analogous towards the scientific viewpoint, which is create a model that allows you to control reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Both those viewpoints, if you stick to them myopically, do tend to make you think in the end that a thing like religion is just for purposes of control of the
Yeah.
self or the world or something like that, which
Right. Which is unraveling
help
this whole
towards.
which is unraveling this whole difficult subject of the connection between magic and religion. Because real religion is being tied to a reality of the structure of the universe that you've seen. So this could be a representational structure, a representational model of what that structure might be like. But if you think of this structure as absolute and something that we can actually control once we understand it, then you're in the realm of magic. And it's
Exactly.
no accident. It's no accident that the first publication of this was in the 1200s, right at that time of the nominalist realist debate. In my opinion, it's no accident.
I don't think it's an accident either. This was historically at a point in time when you got the birth of science and the birth in the belief of magic at the same time, but they didn't call it science and magic. Um, One viewpoint was the view that you would find truth by looking at the natural world. and the other was the viewpoint that you would be able to control the world if you
Yes.
understood it correctly.
Right.
And people don't often think about just how different these two viewpoints are. Overwhelmingly, the magical viewpoint that you could control the world by understanding it is what has predominated our world
Yes.
since.
Precisely. Precisely. And that's exactly where I'm headed with the discussion. So this is really interesting that you're on the same wavelength here
You must admit that
because
it has a huge amount of power too.
yes, right. Exactly. And either you say that's beautiful and I love it and I would like to do what I can in order to, fulfill my life with it, or you say, boy, that's one. You remember Star Trek when the Genesis device and the Klingon played by Peter Lloyd, I think he says to his two subordinates, "What do you think of this?" And the one says, "Oh, it's lovely. You can create whole worlds." He says, "Yes, you can make a little house with your best girl by your side and a little dog running amok. Get out of here." And then the next guy, he says, "What do you think?" He says, "Incredible power." Says, yes, we can control it. It's like that. It's like the Klingon, saying this is about control and power.
I have not seen
Absolutely,
that movie for
absolutely.
so long, but I do
Yeah,
remember
it's a great
very
movie.
much liking how they did it.
But this also plays into something I've been considering recently, which is the splitting of the atom. That movie Oppenheimer that came out that was so good. And I really think, I think there is not a very big leap from thinking of this sort of thing as magic to, say, an Isaac Newton controllable universe. And it's not a big leap from that to trying to examine the fundamentals of the world as being uh, packets of power that can be unleashed.
Yes, and I do want to just put in this cautionary thing right now for the benefit of those who are listening to this, that you and I are using this term magic. We are not using it in the sense of people taking pointy sticks and waving things around and having
No,
sparks flying around. This
no,
is
not at all.
much older meaning that you and I are referring to, and it is specifically the idea of control by
Absolutely.
knowledge. A
Yep.
magus is one who understands
Right.
the old world. Um, and it is entirely ordained towards, do you have power?
Yep.
That's
That's
what
true.
the meaning of magic that we are using right now, and what the Kabbalist movement, and as you point out, the nominalists in the end too.
Yep.
If the question is only about who has the power and how do you get it, that is magical thinking
hmm
in the
Not religious. Yep.
sense.
Yep. And dare I say, the New World Order,
The New
right?
World War, they're all about
Yep.
magic in that
The
sense.
progressives, the New World Order, and it's even today, there are, shall we say, not entirely proven accusations that certain members of the New World Order or the progressive movement practice magic on a regular basis. Is that proven? I don't think so, but there are rumors. There are rumors. And it wouldn't be a big leap to go from that
No,
to this.
because even if they're not succeeding at it with their pointing sticks and waving wands and so forth, the very fact that they would try and do it for the sake of control, for the sake of holding power,
Mhm,
automatically makes it magical
mhm.
activity.
Yeah, and I think I remember reading somewhere somebody said that it doesn't matter whether or not their machinations result in the things that they want. They believe that it will,
Yes,
and that makes a huge difference.
yes.
So, for instance, like doing your magical operations and all those wacky movements and all that might not result in splitting the atom and destroying Hiroshima, but it might galvanize your mind to think we need to create or should create or can create something that will annihilate Hiroshima. You know, so
Yes, and you spoke of it with a certain well-deserved ridicule that like waving your hands a certain way will do it. Um, if you stopped putting it in that silly term and you said, sure, but you have to set up a neutron beam in a small clustered area and explode it exactly the right way in a charge that is shaped exactly this way if you wish to destroy Hiroshima. it is the actions and the hand waving that you've done that does result
Yeah.
in the nuclear bomb and the
Yes, it
power
does.
to destroy.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So we joke about it because the hand waving usually doesn't work unless you're trying to cool yourself off, in which case, hey, magically, I've got power to cool myself off.
Yeah, that's right.
But
But I think
there
one
are
of the
certain actions
tricks,
to do it this way.
yeah, but I think that one of the tricks though of the sorcerers, of the necromancers, is that they frequently run under the guise of religion. You
Yes.
know,
The,
either legitimate religions or underground religions. And that's kind of what we're seeing in Wells right now in this passage.
yes. And it was what he was saying. How do we get the traditions such that we can set society to do what we want it to do?
Right, right. This is what he's trying to do in this open conspiracy. There's not much more here. Let me read this bit here. He says, what is called in the phraseology of certain religions conviction of sin and the flight from the city of destruction are familiar instances of this reference of the self-centered individual and the current social life to something far better than either the one or the other. This is the third element in the religious relationship, a hope, a promise, an objective which turns the convert not only from himself, but from the world as it is towards better things. First comes self-disregard, then comes service, second, then this reconstructive creative urgency. Okay, so he has now defined how the machine of religion works, and he can control it. For the finer sort of mind, I love that phrase.
He loves that.
For the finer sort of mind, this aspect of religion seems almost to have been its primary attraction. One has to remember that there is a real will for religion scattered throughout mankind. I mean, it's kind of shocking. People really actually want religious experience.
Yeah, weird. Yeah.
Yes. A real desire to get
spot
away
that.
from self. Was that?
Takes
Yeah.
a real genius to spot that, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. Religion has never pursued its distinctive votaries. They have come to meet it. The desire to give oneself to greater ends than the everyday life affords and to give oneself freely is clearly dominant in that minority and traceable in an incalculable proportion of the majority.
A,
Yeah, so,
syllables. B, historically, that's not true. I'm sorry.
yeah, right.
It's just not so.
Right. But even the point that he's making here that people pursue religion rather than the other way around, it has this hint of we have to make an attractive religion in order to scoop the people up. You know, that's kind of what he's leading into. And it's quite sinister, I think. It's almost like you could predict a religious order that uses all the trappings of traditional religion in order to scoop people up and bend them to their will. You know, just hypothetically.
Well, in fact, people do
They
that
do
with
all the
religion for
time.
the sake of control.
Yeah.
But in the case of Christianity, I always laugh again thinking about that sketch. It's like, we're going to tell them that Jesus rose, and in return for our pains, we're going to all be brutally murdered.
Yeah, right.
Yay!
Hey. Yeah. Hitherto, religion has never been presented simply as a devotion to a universal cause. The devotion has always been in it, but it has been complicated by other considerations. The leaders in every great religious movement have considered it necessary that it should explain itself in the form of history and a cosmogony. So these are like add-ons, you know, to explain the mechanism. It has been felt necessary to say why and to what end. Oh, gee whiz. I guess we have to ask why. Damn it. Instead of, you know, the sort of organic question that comes up from anybody that is self-reflective, you know. Every religion, therefore, has had to adopt the physical conceptions and usually also to assume many of the moral and social values current at the time of its formation. God, that's just so wrong. Okay, no.
Lots of
Frequently,
syllables.
religion,
Historically, no, that didn't happen.
yeah, frequently, religion is the thing that stands against the social values, especially Judaism. I mean, my goodness, the Jews that were formed in the Babylonian Empire were standing in the middle of an empire that was trying to destroy them.
Yes,
or
we
seduce
end up
them.
thinking of a lot of these. You know what? Buddhism as well, which is founded actually in Nepal, not India, to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
very much against the current values of his time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, that aside, we'll let him get away with this
He
one.
makes up his history all the time. We've seen
He
this a lot. I
does.
know it shocks us every time we see it, but he just makes up his history.
Oh, I keep getting shocked. It could not transcend the philosophical phrases and attitudes that seemed then to supply the natural frame for a faith.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah, good.
Did it all the time.
Yeah.
Nor draw upon anything beyond the store of scientific knowledge of its time. That's total crap right there, because the religions, almost all the religions of West and even of East, draw on knowledge that is ancient, 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 not just of their own time. Quite the opposite. In fact, the ancient knowledge is infusing itself into the current iteration on a regular basis. So that's just flat out wrong. In this
Well,
lurked the seeds of the ultimate decay and supersession of every successive religion. No?
no, no. I think that the decay is more like the decay of the Roman Empire. Um, long peace makes people stop trying.
Yeah,
Or
right, right. But even here, this idea, ultimate decay and supersession, that's an evolutionary idea. That's the idea that we're progressing and things fall away that no longer
very
meet
good.
the
Yeah.
they don't meet the match. But this is interesting too. I wonder in what relation is Wells to, say, Madame Blavatsky,
I have
and the whole.
no idea how much you knew her or not.
I don't know. I don't know whether, because there's that whole spiritual movement. Yeah, she was late 19th century and early 20th. I'm not giving anything. Early 20th, late 19th to early 20th. So it dies in 1891, and her influence is something it had very profound influence on a number of thinkers there in Europe, including eventually people like Goebbels and Himmler in the Nazi Party. So there's this theosophy that was kind of, I mean, even the Russian czars, the Tsarina, was deeply into theosophy.
Yeah.
So I guess my point being is that when he says, "In this lurk the seeds of the ultimate decay and supersession of every successive religion," he wasn't seeing a decay of religion in his time. I mean, he was after the war, of course. I think he was seeing the opposite. I think at that time there was a surge of religion and of spiritualism and theosophy. It wasn't like people were just sitting around being like, "Oh, I'm just giving up on religion. I'm just gonna sit around and drink beer." Um, it, I don't know. It just, again, it irks me because it's not. He's
Well,
making this
go to a
point, but
very,
it's not true.
very narrow viewpoint right here. Was not the Church of England starting to show decay at that point in time?
27.
Yeah,
I would say no.
not in 27. When did that begin for the Church of England?
I don't think the Church of England was really not in decline until after the Second World War. It was after the Second World War that it really began to go into decline,
Okay,
and
then
that was
my whole
primarily.
suggestion that he was looking only at the Church of England then would be wrong too. He's probably just making this up.
I think he's just making it up. Yeah, I think it's just complete BS. It's Wells
Because
BS.
from the Catholic point of view, it was actually a really dynamic point in
Oh,
time. You're
remarkably dynamic.
saying that from the Church of England point of view, which would have been his world, it was doing just fine at a point in time.
Seems to have been. Yeah, it was really the shock of World War II and the infiltration of communism that began to ruin the Church of England in the 50s.
Okay.
But the Catholic Church was very strong at this time in America and England, and really in Europe still. France was still
Okay.
predominantly a Catholic nation, as for that matter, was Germany, even
Yes.
after World War One. One of the ironies of the world. But anyway, yeah, okay, we'll just pass that off as more Wells BS. As the idea of continual change going farther and farther from existing realities and never returning to them is a new one, as nobody until very recently has grasped the fact that the knowledge of today is the ignorance of tomorrow. Each fresh development of religion in the world so far has been proclaimed in perfect good faith as the culminating and final truth.
That is one single run-on sentence right there. I laugh at this because I think the whole point is so that it will sound good, but nobody will know what he's talking about. Um, he has certain phrases in there today, which I look at and once again I shake my head that nobody until recently has grasped the fact that the knowledge of today is the ignorance of tomorrow. What does that even mean?
What does that mean? If he means, for instance, that we are seeing a decline in religion, and so we have a golden opportunity to create a religion, maybe.
No, no, no. What he's implying is that what we think is true now will later on be proven to be false, as will be the case with any, say, scientific model. They all get adapted as time goes on further. At that point in time, the knowledge of what atomic theory was has been superseded by what we know now. But we don't say, oh, just because they were wrong then, we are so much wiser now. That's it's a bad attitude. And it's also not the case that nobody until recently has grasped that fact that things get refined over time.
Yeah,
People have understood this concept since well before the Roman Empire.
a long time ago.
So
I just thought of
make that
something. I
up.
think what he is doing is he's setting us up for this next suggestion, which is that the old forms of Christianity are coming to an end. We need to adapt this new thing of the project, right, to make religion to make a religion that resembles Christianity, but is actually doing what we want it to do. I think that's what he's
All right, let's
setting up
find out
for.
if that's where
Okay.
he takes it.
Okay. Because basically what he's saying here is that people of his era are saying that Christianity is the end thing. It's the final statement. But the Jews said that, and before them the Greeks, and before them the Egyptians. And so obviously religion has crumbled and given way to successive religions, as you said, just as scientific theory has done. So now what you think is the current and final truth of Christianity is not the current and final truth. And seeing that allows us to create a new religion that will serve the end goal of furthering mankind. I think that's what
I
he's
know
saying.
you're going to read on in this, and I do want to hear that, but I just want to point out back in the Middle Ages, the whole reason that the great flower motif is put into the cathedrals was the understanding that God is revealing himself in the world as a flower is unfolding.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
This is
Yeah,
not like, oh, the truth today is ignorant for, well, it wasn't a flower because it was folded up before.
yeah,
No, it is a process of opening and
yeah, it is.
revealing more and more. Let's see what he has to say about it, though.
This finality of statement has considerable immediate practical value, I'm assuming for the progressives. The suggestion of the possibility of further restatement is an unsettling suggestion. In other words, if we were to restate these old things as new, that would unsettle a great many people. It undermines conviction and breaks the ranks of the believers because there are enormous variations in the capacities of men to recognize the same spirit under a changing shape. Mm-hmm. Some people can do that, others can't. The intelligent can recognize that it's the same God in every religion. The ignorant think that gods are different. These variations cause endless difficulties today. Yes, these variations cause endless difficulties today because the ignorant think that their God is the only God. I've heard this sort of thing from Blavatsky and the spiritualists. So maybe the theosophic thing really did influence him to some degree. Theosophy used to say that there's one spirit and he takes different forms, whether it's Buddhist or Shinto or Islam or Jewish or Christian. They're all the same God. They just take different forms. And if we can recognize it's the same God, then we can put aside our religious differences and we put it into war. So it's not, I mean, I think he's drawing from that.
Okay, I see that's where he's going. I'm mostly
Okay.
going to try to keep my mouth shut. I want him to hang himself on
Yep.
this part.
Yep. While some intelligences can recognize the same God under a variety of names and symbols without any severe strain, others cannot even detect the most contrasted gods, one from the other, provided they wear the same mask and title. It appears a perfectly natural and reasonable thing to many minds to restate religion now in terms of biological and psychological necessity. while to others any variation whatever in the phrasing of the faith seems to be nothing less than atheistical misrepresentations of the most damnable kind.
Am I a lesser intelligence to think that restating religion in terms of biological and psychological necessity is highly dangerous thing to do?
Well, see,
Winds up with you deciding who should be killed and who should live.
yes, that's intriguing. To restate religion and biological and psychological necessity is a very, very, very dangerous thing, I think, because that's what ends up in a really damnable kind of activity, right? That actually, I think that also ends up more frequently than not in creating genocide and religious wars. But
Yeah.
he seems to be suggesting, and I will say it is an objection that some have made against people like Jordan Peterson. I don't know if that's entirely legitimate, but to reduce religion to biology and psychology only is again a materialistic vision of control.
Jordan Peterson, I have not listened to him say that part right there, but if that's what he's saying, he is wrong on that point.
I
If
don't think
that's
he
what he
is.
says.
I don't think he is.
Don't get me wrong, because the biological world and the patterns we see in it can indeed be brought into religion. But it doesn't say, oh, religion has to follow these laws because mankind is managed to create this box that we will now stuff religion into.
Right.
Biology also doesn't fit inside boxes either. That's another thing too.
No, it's an odd thing.
I know that's a sort of an off thought there, but the whole
Right.
way he's trying to put everything into, well, I said boxes, but models for control.
Yes, it is.
I'm gonna
It's
let it. I
damnable.
said I was going to shut up and let him damn himself.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think that's kind of the key sentence. He's reducing religion to biology and psychology, and he's cutting out a whole swath of the religious experience that rests in the metaphysical, the spiritual realm. Does our biology and psychology incorporated into the religious realm? Absolutely. That's been recognized as far back as Thomas Aquinas, who talks about philosophy being the handmaiden to theology. Philosophy or psychology, they're not completely interchangeable, but there's a very close connection between those two realms. And biology, of course, is how we live our lives. That's simply the ethics of Aristotle, doing certain things so that you can lose weight or you don't vomit every night or whatever it is. But our biological and psychological necessity is one part of a much, much larger picture. And he wants to cut out that larger part because you can't control that other part. That's the issue. Nobody can actually control the metaphysical experience. When someone has a religious experience, they have a religious experience, regardless of the state, regardless of the pontiffs or the hierophants. And that can't be even beaten out of a person easily, anyway. And witness the great story of The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene. You can beat the man to death, but he still has that sense of the religious. Or Silence by Shisako Endo. You can crush a person until they're absolutely devastated, and they still retain that religious experience.
Indeed, until they might appear to break.
Yeah, right.
And then discover that they did not, which is what happens.
Right.
And if you were to go back in history, I mean, the early martyrs crushed them. Fine. Take St. Bartholomew, flay his
Yep.
skin off.
Yeah.
You'll not make him stop believing.
Yeah.
By the way, that's a very horrible way to die.
Yeah. So I've heard. Don't know it by personal experience, but I heard it.
Yeah.
It's like being pressed to death or put on the grill like St. Lawrence. So he's automatically condemning people that want to object to this biological and psychological reductionism because they say that it's an atheistical misrepresentation.
But he automatically says that they are lesser minds for thinking so.
They are lesser minds, right? And he puts it in terms of you guys are atheists. So obviously they're stupid because they talk in a Southern accent, right? Because all Southerners are dummies.
Exactly.
Which I take great offense against being Southern myself, although I mask it pretty well. So he goes on to say these latter, the ones that represent what religion really is, which is a biological and psychological necessity, these latter, God, I think there's a misprint here. Um, these latter
Can you
God,
slide it
a
up a little?
gods.
Can you slide the text up a little bit because I actually can't see it. There we go.
I think he's trying to say here, for these latter, God is a God, still anthropomorphic enough to have a will and purpose to display preferences and reciprocate emotions. To be indeed in person must be retained until the end of time. For others, for the enlightened, God can be thought of as a great first cause, as impersonal and inhuman as atomic structure.
Freemasons believe that.
They do.
Yeah.
They do exactly. So and so I'm sure do the Fabians.
I'm sure they did too. Anyone that sees it as the machine god.
Yep.
Um,
Because the Fabians, even today, suggest that what we're dealing with when we deal with God is the clockmaker God, an impersonal and inhuman God, who, because he is impersonal and inhuman, can be either ignored or controlled, just
yeah,
like
and
atomic
he does
structure.
not actually care.
Yeah,
They
yeah, right,
they
exactly.
deny the Christian belief that though there is no reason why God ought to, God loves each individual personally.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
and
they
and even
prefer
for
God to
even
do
for people,
themselves.
okay, so and I'm speaking as a believer. To believe that makes all the world of difference in how you act. You
Yes.
know, so even if who is the great? It's not Elie Wiesel. I forget who writes this. He writes, even if it's not true, to act as though it were true is extremely important. I forget who the writer was who talked about that, but it'll come to me later. But to act as though it were true is extremely important. If you act as though God is either non-existent or God is some great first cause that's impersonal and inhuman, you can either control him or neglect him completely. If you act as though God is actually immanent, is present, is currently taking interest in each and every one of his creations, you will act very differently. You know? So he's, again, setting up this high intellectual God so that you can create this new religion.
Well, among other things, if God is impersonal and inhuman as a atomic structure, you can get away with stuff because God doesn't actually care.
Right? That's right. So let's create
The
some
Superman
some
can do
work
it.
camps,
Oh,
create some
good
labor
Lord.
camps.
I'm
It
sorry,
is
I just
because of
read the next paragraph. It's like, oh my God, though.
I know. It just gets worse. Like I want to get to the final paragraph here because that's a zinger. It is because of the historical and philosophical commitments they have undertaken, and because of concessions made to common human weaknesses in regard to such once apparently minor but now vital moral issues as property and mental activity and public veracity, rather than of any inadequacy in their adaptation to psychological needs that the present wide discredit of organized religions has come about. So, present religions are widely discredited because of historical and philosophical commitments that they've undertaken, whereas um, they should be making more concessions to human weakness in regard to vital moral issues
No,
like
no, no,
property,
no.
mental
You're
activity.
missing that part. He's saying that they made concessions that they thought were small, but turned out to be very large. That's what
Ah,
he's saying. Such as
I see,
property.
rather than of any inadequacy in their adaptation to psychological needs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there you go. They got it. They've got to learn how to adapt to psychology.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so otherwise they wouldn't, and if they do that, they won't be widely discredited because the Church of England is doing so well these days.
Yes, having adapted itself to psychology so well.
It sure as shit has. They no longer seem even roughly truthful upon issues of fact, and they give no
Is there
imperatives
some
over.
author whose rhymes with smells also seems to have not much overlap with issues of fact?
Yeah,
It
right.
seems to make stuff up. I don't remember who that smells guy was though.
Yeah, I forget his name. It's a British fella.
GH
Looks like a
smells, I think
wolf.
it was.
Yeah. It reminds me of that line out of Dickens, right? Mr. Gradgrind. What is a horse? We want facts. Facts. They no
Yes.
longer seem even roughly truthful upon issues of fact, And they give no imperatives over large fields of conduct in which perplexity is prevalent. That's wonderful from coming from a guy who tried to sleep with every woman in the Fabian society. But whatever. People will say, I could be perfectly happy leading the life of a Catholic devotee if only I could please. But most of the framework of religious explanation upon which that life is sustained is too old-fashioned and too irrelevant to admit of that thoroughness of belief which is necessary for the devotion of intelligent people.
He has clearly never read John of the Cross.
Yeah, well, among many others, you know, but this is the thing that gets my goat. It really gets my goat. One is the assumption that believers are not intelligent people. That just gets my goat. Like somehow, if you're a believer, you've got to be some cornbread, buck-toothed idiot, right? That just
So you remember the story of the rich young man that comes to Jesus and asks how he may be saved. Jesus says, here are the precepts of the law. And he says, well, I do all that, but what else must I do? And Jesus says, give up your wealth. So this was almost 30 years ago. I started to really, really wrestle with this because I mean, I'm going to sound like an arrogant jerk here, but
that's okay.
I'm not stupid. I'm an exceptionally intelligent and accomplished man.
Yeah, you kind of smart.
And I may be a little arrogant. I try not to be, but back in my 20s, I was already aware that I was different from people in this guard, that I saw
Yeah, right,
things faster than
right.
others did. And I started to wrestle with that story. What if the wealth in question is not something you could simply hand over in a bag as if it
Yeah,
was gold? What
yeah,
if the
right.
wealth in question is that God has given you this extraordinary gift, but you are seeing that it is not what brings you to salvation?
Well, two things on that immediately, Benjamin. It's a great insight. 2 points on that. One is that some people have suggested that the young man who comes to Christ is a magus. He's called a young man,
I can see that. I can
but
really see that.
yeah, that he is one of the knowledgeable. He's a scribe, or he's one of these magi out of the east. He's not just wealthy as in penthouse life. He is wealthy in the sense that he has good, luxurious life of contemplation of all the great works. So there's that. But the other thing that comes to mind is that Tolkien says this very thing. You know, Tolkien talks, and so does Hayao Miyazaki for that matter, when he's talking about his animation. At the end, he said, I never should have invented anime, which is a sense that anime has been an impediment. Now, may be an impediment for him, I think joy for others, but that's neither here nor there. But Tolkien says the same thing. Tolkien talks about how the creation of artwork, the creation of beautiful things is a gift, but it has to be given up because that's not ultimately what we're about. What we're about is the religious life. He says that in his letters. And so in his image of the ring, for instance, in the Lord of the Rings, he's not just using the image of the ring as some dastardly weapon that evil Nazis are going to use. The ring is something which is itself a power to be able to control. And you have to give it up. And that for him is art.
This was very much the conclusion that I came to, is that you're going to have this great gift, but are you going to decide that that is the great purpose of your
Right.
life?
Exactly.
Or are you
Exactly.
going to give up that purpose in favor of something else that is given to you
Sure.
humbly by God?
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
that's a tough
it,
one.
it, it, it,
Believe me,
it is, it
I
is
totally
like,
sympathize.
yeah. Well, we who are very intelligent, unlike those lesser minds.
But I think a similar thing would be said if you had another skill, musician, for instance, or actor, or even something menial. You know, some people are very good at the lathe, excellent at woodcraft. You know, is that their sole
Is that
purpose?
the sole purpose of your life? And
Yeah,
can you go out and just inflict pain on somebody else because they can't do that? Because
right,
Wells seems to think that the highly intelligent people, that it doesn't matter for them. They can trample wherever they feel like.
right.
Can you,
And
if a person is using religion because her son was killed and she has huge pain and needs something just to hang on to, do you have the right to take that away from her?
right, exactly, exactly. Yeah. Is it your right to force people to actually give up their religion because they're being ignorant when they use it in order to mourn the death of their daughter?
But his conclusion is yes, for the good of society, you shouldn't be allowed that selfish moment of mourning
Yes.
your daughter. You should give it up.
For the greater good, the greater cause. Yes, exactly.
I
And
hate
I
him for
think
that.
also, I think also that if we were to call a spade here, I think this comes back to a demonic vision of the world, because this idea here that there must there's a thoroughness of belief which is necessary for the devotion of intelligent people. What this suggests is that the intelligent person has to thoroughly believe everything and understand everything, I would say too. Otherwise, they cannot believe, they won't believe, they refuse to do so. That is a satanic response. That's the
Yes,
non serviam.
it is absolute arrogance too.
Sure.
To believe that also that you're capable of understanding everything.
Yeah, good Lord. The older I get, the less I want to. You know,
No, I think I agree with that. The
I mean,
older
yeah,
I've gotten, the less I want to
I still
understand it all.
thirst. I still thirst for knowledge, and I still find myself intrigued by certain things and love talking about certain ideas. But I've turned over enough stones and seen enough cockroaches that I just really, I don't know if I want to turn over any more stones. Yeah,
Well, I'm afraid that you don't have the thoroughness of belief necessary for the devotion of a truly intelligent person.
apparently not. There's that great scene again to go back to that movie Oppenheimer, a very, very intelligent person, right?
Exceptionally.
And yet at the very opening of the movie, he's having visions of the entire world busting into pieces, chaos and just this hell basically. And there's a scene where he wants to get back at his professor, and so he poisons an apple and gives it to his professor. And the professor doesn't eat it, and he repents himself, and he goes and he switches the apple and throws away this arsenic laden apple. But to me, that's a really remarkable image, because here's this intelligent person who needed thoroughness of belief in order to have a devotion, who was ready to kill another human being.
Just because he made him mad.
Yes.
So
I mean, son of a bitch.
they put that in the movie, by the way, but we ought to, for fairness sake, say that we're not sure that that actually happened in Oppenheimer's life.
Who knows? Who knows? It's
It's
it's good
still,
cinema.
nonetheless, it's a very important moment because even someone that intelligent is not free from the
That's
desire
right.
to take revenge.
That's right. We all have to remember that Paul Pot, the butcher of the Khmer Rouge, was in his earlier life a grammar and composition teacher,
Hmm.
just like me.
Please don't become the head of any group like Karush. I ask this of you as a great favor out
Like
of love.
apocalypse now, right?
Yes, don't become Colonel Kurt.
Sorry. Dark humor, like food, not everybody gets it. Great ingenuity has been shown by modern writers and thinkers in the adaptation of venerated religious expressions to new ideas. Peccavi, usually translated, I have sinned. Have I not written of the creative will in humanity as God, the invisible king, and presented it in the figure of a youthful and adventurous, finite God? Right? So the creative will in humanity is God, the invisible king. That's God is in you. The word God is in most minds so associated with the concept of religion that it is abandoned only with the greatest reluctance. The word remains, though the idea is continually attenuated. Respect for him demands that he should have no limitations. He is pushed farther and farther from actuality, therefore, and his definition becomes increasingly a bundle of negations until at last, in his role as the absolute, he becomes an entirely negative expression. While we can speak of good, say some, can speak of God. Oh, can speak of good, say some, can speak. I don't know. That's weird, weirdly printed. While we can speak of good, some can speak of God, I guess. Anyway, God is the possibility of
No,
goodness.
no, no. I think that what he means is if you can speak about good, then you can speak about God. They are
Ah,
the
yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, sounds good. Okay,
That's what it's
sounds
saying.
God. That's good. That is God König.
Mm.
God is the possibility of goodness, the good side of things. If phrases in which the name of God is used are to be abandoned, they argue, religion will be left speechless before many occasions.
By the way, what's the point of this part right here? I mean, it's got no connection to his earlier argument, and he is stating this stuff. What's the point?
I think the point is that he's trying to make a case against the organized religions of his day, and that most people would argue that if you get rid of religions, you get rid of God itself, and you become an atheist, and then it all falls to shit. But what he's pointing out here, I think, is that God is in these religions pushed farther and farther from actuality, becoming a God of don't do this, don't do that. But in his real role, he is goodness. He is the concept of goodness. He is the possibility of goodness. So anytime we see something as good, we see it that way because God is the yardstick for goodness. He's not associated with any particular religion. I think he's divorcing religion. He's untying the legio of religion from the concept of God.
All right, I'll
I
hear
think
what
that's
you
what
have
he's doing.
to say.
Okay.
It's
Does that make sense? Even whether we agree with it or not, which I don't, but again,
I'll
it's
see what you
interesting.
have to say about this
I
because
don't agree with most everything he's writing here, and yet I can see in this writing the roots of some problems, many problems that we're dealing with right now. So it's intriguing to read it in that sense. So it's like the grandparents of our modern peril.
so,
To go on, certainly there's something beyond the individual that is, and the world that is. On that we've already insisted as a characteristic of all religions, that persuasion is the essence of faith and the key to courage. But whether that is to be considered, even after the most strenuous exercises in personification, as a greater person or a comprehensive person is another matter. Personality is the last vestige of anthropomorphism. The modern urge to a precise veracity is against such concessions to traditional expression. So, in other words, traditionally, we've always anthropomorphized this sense of goodness, and we've made it into a being in and of itself and given it personality and said it's God, who is the pinnacle of our sense of goodness. But essentially, he doesn't exist.
I get
Goodness
it.
exists,
I
but
get it.
God does not.
Admittedly. All right. As I've
Okay?
said before this point, distrust him when he uses large amounts of syllables. But please notice that he's also reversing the older concept that man is made in the image of God. He's using this when he says personality is the last vestige of anthropomorphism, that God is shaped into the image of man. Well,
Yep.
that's actually more what he's doing.
Yes.
To tell you the
It
truth.
is a it is a
He's using the
classic.
others of doing it.
Yeah. It's a classic inversion is what it is. And honestly, this whole concept has been poked so full of holes that it's like bleeding constantly. One of the biggest problems with this is if God is a amplification of my own self-image or even an amplification of the self-image of a group, he would be much better and he would be much more allowing of our failings, so to speak, right? As it is, the God Yahweh or the God, even if you want, of other religions like Hinduism, is not that way, right? He's either fierce with people or he is loving and trying to nudge us away from certain things that we would like to engage in. So it's a silly argument, basically, stupid argument. We could brush it away with ne'er more than a wave of the hand. On the other hand, there is in many religious minds,
Fine religious minds.
a desire amounting almost to a necessity for an object of devotion so individualized as to be capable, at least, of a receptive consciousness, even if no definite response is conceded. One type of mind can accept a reality in itself which another must project and dramatize before it can comprehend it and react to it. The human soul is an intricate thing which will not endure elucidation when that passes beyond a certain degree of harshness and roughness. The human spirit has learnt love, devotion, obedience, and humility in relation to other personalities, and with difficulty it takes the final step to a transcendent subordination from which the last shred of personality has stripped.
So is this the start of the trend to use enormous words which don't actually have meaning, like talking about transcendent subordination of which a personality is stripped? I know that these days that it's very popular among scholars to write whole papers that involve meaningless phrases of strings of words together like this.
Well, to be honest, this is a very old practice. You see this in Shakespeare and plays, and you even see it in things like Aristophanes comedies. So it's very old. It's basically a form of prestidigitation where you throw up enough, like prestidigitation is a form of prestidigitation.
Yeah.
Prestidigitation is basically flailing your fingers so that people don't notice you're doing something with your toes, you know. It's throwing up big words to obscure to obscure what you really mean. A classic example of this is in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where John Goodman, who plays the Cyclops, he encounters Odysseus and his sidekick in the restaurant, and he says, "I tend to refrain from gustation, or from I tend to refrain from conversation after gustatory activity. I think it imparts a certain coarseness and leads to indigestion." Basically says, "I don't want to talk to you," but he uses all those big words like gustation and then imparts in order to make this sound like he's saying something really important.
Well, that is this paragraph right here. What he's saying is that there's different kinds of people in this world that see things differently. And
Yeah.
he just spent how many lines saying there's different people that see things differently?
Yep. He uses his words dirtier than
Yeah.
a $20 war.
Complete side note in terms of prestidigitation, I was deeply impressed with my son that was showing me card trick prestidigitation the other day. And he was pointing out that the whole way that it works is to make sure that you're watching the person's fingers because you
Uh,
think that's where it's happening, when in reality, long before the fingers actually began, he'd already slipped the card away to the backside of his hand where you couldn't see it.
that's good. That's good. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, that's essentially saying people think differently, but I think embedded in there too, the slipping the card behind the back that Wells does here is to say basically again, there is no God.
Yeah,
That we all desire a God. We would desire a response, but a higher mind can accept that there's no God, that
but
he's
the
just a
higher minds
creation.
make their object of devotion.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's personalized to them.
Right, right. But the human soul is an intricate thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those again, like creating this image that he's eventually going to suggest here that we make a new God. We make a new religion.
Well, let's find out if that's what he says.
And how much more do we have to endure this son of a bitch anyway? Gosh, he just
They
goes
can
on
only
and
take
on.
it in certain amounts.
Um,
5 or 6 more paragraphs.
yeah, I think we can do it. In matters not immediately material, language has to work by metaphors. And though every metaphor carries its own peculiar risks of confusion, we cannot do without them. Great intellectual tolerance is
That's
necessary,
actually true.
therefore, a cultivated disposition to translate and retranslate from one metaphysical or emotional idiom to another, if there is not to be a deplorable wastage of moral force in our world.
Okay,
Just
right
now I
up
wrote,
until that last sentence right there.
yeah,
Had no problem with it right up to the point where he says the reason is so that we don't waste moral force.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Up until that point, yes, I agreed with everything he said. But the point isn't to have moral force to drive things in our world. That's not the reason.
Yeah. Yeah, he also misses a huge point, which psychologically has been pointed out by other linguists and philologists, is that human beings, our whole thinking system is an analogy system, an analog system. It's not a metaphor system. It's an analog system. Um,
Well, And it's right. The reason it keeps being retold in different metaphors is because it does have to become personalized every
Right.
single time. And if it's going to become personalized, there's a new story that's created to each person every
Sure.
time. That is
Sure.
a metaphor, sure. So it will continue to be talked in a changing way
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and that's that classic thing that I always hammer on my little Johnny One Note phrase of mythopoeic speculation. I totally believe that, that we keep recrafting the stories of yore, but that's not what I mean by analog system. By analog system, I mean that we are always thinking in terms of an image to represent something else. Even our language itself, by nature, is a representation of a concept that we're trying to get across. But the concepts themselves are connected to things beyond us as well. Otherwise, they would have no force, weight, or importance. They would be pointless. We wouldn't really be thinking at all. So metaphor is a tool of analog, not the other way around, if that makes sense.
No, it
Okay.
does make sense, but
Okay.
it also is exactly why language does keep shifting.
Right.
Um,
Right. Language keeps shifting in order that the current generation can understand what the analog is.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Anyway, just now I wrote peccavi because I had written God the invisible king. But after all, I do not think it was so much a sin to use that phrase, God the invisible king, as an error in expression. If there is no sympathetic personal leader outside us, there is at least in us the attitude we should adopt towards a sympathetic personal
All
leader.
right, we've already gotten to the there is no God argument now. Here we
See?
are.
That's what I'm saying.
Ta-da!
There's no
Welcome, there is no God.
I love how he goes into the Latin peccavi. That's really cute.
Well, it's because only more intelligent minds can speak Latin.
Yeah, I guess so.
Sed ego dicam lingua Latinum.
And has nothing to do with the fact that the souls in purgatory in Dante's Purgatorio have peccavi written on their forehead that has to be wiped away as they get to the next level. Three profound differences between the new mental dispositions of the present time and those of preceding ages have to be realized if current developments of the religious impulse are to be seen in their correct relationship to the religious life of the past.
Three
There has
differences.
been a great
What are they?
advance in the analysis of psychic processes and the courage with which men have probed into the origins of human thought and feeling. Following upon the biological advances that have made us recognize fish and amphibian in the bodily structure of man, have come, it's so funny because that's so been discredited, have become, he's talking about embryonic research, basically, right? I mean,
Oh,
and early on,
that's right. The idea that embryos are all the same and yada
yeah,
yada. Humans are actually
yeah,
just fish that change.
exactly. And it was a support of evolutionary theory. Have become these parallel developments in which we see elemental fear and lust and self-love molded, modified, and exalted under the stress of social progress in intricate human motives. Our conception of sin and our treatment of sin have been profoundly modified by this analysis. Our former sins are seen as ignorances, inadequacies, and bad habits, and the moral conflict is robbed of three-fourths of its ego-centered melodramatic quality. We are no longer moved to be less wicked. We are moved to organize our conditioned reflexes and lead a life less fragmentary and silly.
So this was written before the Wannsee conference and the decision to kill millions and millions of people just because they belong to a certain race, right?
Yes, yes,
That
absolutely.
was
But then
just
he wouldn't have known
ignorance.
that.
It wasn't wickedness. As you can
It was
see, the
ignorance.
greater minds were just
Yeah.
ignorant.
Right, right.
No, I'm
Those
sorry. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. You can choose to be wicked.
they were very wicked indeed. Yeah, ignorances, inadequacies, and bad habits. That's what
Adolf
sin really
Eichmann
is. Yes.
was a very intelligent man.
Yeah.
He was not ignorant. He was
No.
extremely evil.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, and he was not the worst of them too, which is terrible. But yeah,
No, he's not.
yeah. It's we are no longer moved to be less wicked. Um,
I should hope we are.
no, again, we are moved to be less wicked, actually. We're moved to organize our conditioned reflexes and lead a life less fragmentary and silly. Wow.
No, less wicked is really the correct route. Not
But if what he says had purchase, You could see a lot of young men perhaps saying, I'm tired of the dissolution of my society and I want to restore the glory of the past and lead a life that's less fragmentary and silly. And so, therefore, I'm going to follow this party and I'm going to wear these uniforms and I'm going to do these salutes and I'm going to break glass windows of these pariahs of my society, and I'm going to send people off to death camps that are part of, that sickness. I could see people saying, "Yeah, that's the new religion. That's the religion I want to follow." You
Yes,
know,
and they do to this day.
yeah, right. One that is cohesive, is centralized. We all have the same will, the same focus, and it's not silly at all. It's not just, when the Führer says we are the master race, then we hop right in the Führer's face. No, 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 none of that. No humor, comrade. No laughing. That's not funny. How many feminists does it take to screw in a light bulb after all?
That's not funny.
Right.
Thing is, you'll notice that he doesn't take a moment to consider the consequences of thinking about what it would mean if people are not moved to be less wicked. If he doesn't take a moment to even think that perhaps the great power of science can be twisted and perverted towards
That, that, that,
immense evil.
that wonderful line that Jeff Goldblum delivers in the first Jurassic Park, right? You were so concentrated on whether you could do it, you
Could
never
do
thought about whether you should do
it.
it.
Should.
That is a classic indictment of this whole project of the progressives. And it goes up until yesterday. It goes up until this whole like blotting out the sky in order to make the place cooler or putting a ticks full of something that will kill cows, whatever. Have you even watched the show? No. I mean, come on. But here's something which is really devastating to me about this whole document. It's one thing to talk about it in closed rooms or speculate over whiskeys about how we can improve this, that, and the other, and then stumble off into the night and collapse into the bed with, your shoes off. It's another thing entirely to print it, send it to your editor, have your editor revise it, reprint it, have other people comment on it, reprint it again, and then publish it as a major work.
Yes,
You
after
know?
four revisions. And you can't even claim the excuse of ignorance because no one's ever seen it put in practice before, because this was written after the First World War.
Yes. Yeah. So they had tried to
You
put it in
would think
practice already.
that would already let people know how it might go if you try and put it in practice.
Yeah. Keep your comfort to yourself, for goodness sakes,
Yeah.
Jeez. You don't like in George Soros, his book, right? His biography, or is it autobiography? I don't know, but biography, because everybody's an extension of George Soros, so maybe it is an autobiography, where he talks about how he's actually God. You know, he actually says in that book, "I am God," and when I realized that, I was liberated. Like, yeah, okay, George, fine, you're God, a God, maybe.
Yeah, that's a little disconcerting and somebody starts to think that.
Yeah, right. We used to call that dementia or, psychosis, psychopathy. But this is interesting that he would publish this whole thing and not give any thought to the possibility that maybe this might have some unintended consequences. There's a great movie by Alfred Hitchcock called Rope,
Yes, I know this
where
movie.
the professor basically is professing about the Übermensch by Nietzsche, and his
Yes.
students take him seriously. Hell
And
of a movie.
a lovely dinner party. And his
Oh,
students are aware that they've murdered a man and put him inside the table while they're having their dinner
and had his parents eat dinner off of the table,
table.
which is
Yes.
the really sick part.
Hmm.
Yeah. It is a movie of sickness and perversion, I think, which is Alfred Hitchcock's commentary on this sort of thing. Maybe not on Wells,
Oh,
I don't know, but
it
on
absolutely
this sort of thing.
it's his commentary on the whole notion that the greater mind is capable of doing it. In fact, that's very much a part of the theme of that movie, because they say they can do it because they have greater minds.
Yep, they do, don't they? Yeah, yeah. Hitchcock really had insight into the depth of perversion of the human soul.
He was a bad man himself too,
Oh
but
yeah,
he
he was.
understood these
Sure.
things for art's sake.
But he like Roman Polanski, he was a bad man who made great art.
Or Michelangelo.
Yeah, right. The third of the main contrasts between modern and former thought, which have rendered the general shapes of established religion old-fashioned and unserviceable, is a reorientation of current ideas about time. This is interesting.
What he's going to do is he's going to try and rewrite history. Of course, we've already seen that he doesn't really care about history.
Well, it is also intriguing because the two major attacks that actually prompted Tolkien and Lewis to write their space trilogy, their science fiction stories, were attacks on space and time. Because the idea of the progressives was essentially that they could conquer space and time and thus conquer the universe. That's why H.G. Wells writes his two great works of The Time Machine and The First Men in the Moon. So Tolkien and Lewis, Lewis goes on to write out of the Silent Planet as a direct response to The First Men in the Moon. And Tolkien was going to write a time travel story in direct response to The Time Machine, but he got busy with a little work called The Lord of the Rings. So, but yeah, time. Here we go. The powerful disposition of the human mind to explain everything as the inevitable unfolding of a past. There's your flower, Ben. Can't have a flower. You have to crush that baby. The powerful disposition of the human mind. Everything is the inevitable unfolding of a past event, which, so to speak, sweeps the future helplessly before it, has been checked by a mass of subtle criticisms. Yeah. The conception of progress as a broadening and increasing purpose, a conception which is taking hold of the human imagination more and more firmly, turns religious life towards the future.
Notice he's in favor of this conception as progress.
Yes, because in the concept of Wells, religious thought focuses on the past, not on the future. And what we have to do in this great project,
he says it's that way.
He says that, yes.
Okay. So what are you talking about? That's not true at all.
I know. And he, in the great program here, you have to shift religion away from the past, breaking it of its past ties, its religio, and focuses it towards the future, the improvement of mankind, the conquering of nature, and the control of space and time. Okay? That's, on the one hand, interesting, and on the other hand, terrifying. Yeah.
I'm also sorry. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, divorce from religion. This is a question of history right there. The disposition to explain everything as an inevitable unfolding of a past event has been checked. So I was watching a video today which had to do with a historical thing, Oliver Cromwell invading Scotland in the 1600s, and the MacLean clan stood against him. And it was a brutal massacre of the MacLeans. They died very nobly, trying to stop this horrendous thing that Cromwell did some really horrendous things towards this.
He was not a good guy.
The survivors had to run, and they ran to the colonies, which are now the Americas. But the experience of that one event meant that the survivors passed on to their children this distrust that the government they were under was ever going to care about their welfare. And that idea was then passed on by their children to their children, which is part of the long chain of how the American colonies ultimately separated.
Fascinating.
Because
fascinating.
this event had that importance of unfolding over many generations.
Yeah.
So what's he talking about?
200 years.
Been swept away.
Well, again, he's making claims in order to be able to put forth his idea of wresting religion away from its control over the human mind and putting it in the hands of the state, essentially. But it's almost like a willed myopia. He has a really, it's a really puerile. Sorry.
He wants an end result, and he's gonna twist everything so that it's
absolutely.
Result.
Yeah, it's a very puerile vision of time, to be honest. And anybody who's actually studied physics will tell you that time, even the physical time, is much more complex than that.
Yes.
But historians, most of whom are not physicists, historians will over and over again say that cause and effect in history is a thing. It happens constantly. And we have cultural idioms and cultural, what would you call them, habits that have a debt to generations, hundreds, if not thousands of years ago that we don't even recognize.
A debt sometimes to single individuals that
Yes.
we don't even know their
Yeah.
names anymore.
Yep.
Um, you and I have studied a lot of history, so we can point to a lot of these individuals that other people won't know just because we studied them all. But even if you and I didn't know it, it is just a fact that certain individual choices have made profound differences. Um, I can make the point right here, just as an example. Saint Columba, who was the
Yeah.
son of the High King. We've talked about him a little before. What if he had chosen? What if his choice was to actually become the High King
Yeah.
rather than to become a monk whose primary goal was to restore knowledge throughout the world? So much of the ancient world's knowledge would have been lost
We've been
if
lost.
he'd made
Yeah.
that choice,
Right.
because it is his choice that created the whole group that followed him, whose devotion was to find knowledge, copy it, and propagate it. We owe a huge debt to that man.
Real tremendous. Yeah. Tremendous debt. I mean, and there are numerous characters in history that we can point to as
So
that
many.
the actions of that figure or the actions of that group of people unfolded over time to produce results that they never thought would actually happen. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's amazing. This claim is actually really kind of a stunning claim, like so many of these things here. But it is a claim which, again, is designed in order to upend the normal course of thinking and replace it with this new course of thinking, which is we will say what is important in order to move towards the future. We'll cut you. And this is classic socialist behavior, happens all the time. Cut people off from their past, have children turn their parents in, break ties with the old so that we can bring in the new. This is like Mao's cultural revolution in a sort of uh, sanitized way. That's what he was doing when he was talking about the great evils, the great bads in society, and trying to root out all the old teachers and mentors of the young.
Yes. And Mao, very much like Wells right here, was of the opinion that you need to keep increasing how much your job is that you're doing, as opposed to those people that focused on one thing and getting it right.
Yeah, yeah, which is that's labor enough, I think.
It's quite a lot of work to get
It's
one
quite a
thing
lot of
right.
work. The slow, difficult labor of learning to translate a language well. Very, very difficult. And it takes years of work,
Isn't that
but
what
it's
happened
worth it.
with the Champollion, who spent his entire life trying to figure out how to translate Egyptian?
Yeah,
I believe it did. His
yeah,
entire adult life is spent doing that and nothing
yeah.
else.
And people owe a debt to what he did,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
as they do to Budge, as they do even to Schliemann, butcher that he was. So, okay,
Or to the Wright brothers, who
or
spent
the
their
Wright
life
brothers,
figuring out how
right?
to make an
Yeah,
airplane that actually works.
yep.
So, whatever.
Whatever.
Conception of progress.
Yeah. Well, this progress almost always inevitably requires the idea that people in the past were stupid, that they didn't get it right. We are getting it right in the French Revolution. The history of our world, which has been unfolded to us by science, runs counter to all the histories on which religions have been based. Sure does. There was no creation in the past, we begin to realize, but eternally, there is creation. There was no fall to account for the conflict of good and evil, but a stormy ascent. Life as we know it is a mere beginning. Ooh, that's deep. Life as we know it is a mere beginning. I should put that in one of those little memes and put that out on the Facebook.
Do I come listen to Jack Candy right now?
This is really just, there's no creation in the past. Increasingly among physicists, this seems to be that they're beginning to lean towards this idea. Hotly debated, but they're leaning towards it.
All right.
So
All right.
we begin to realize, man, maybe you, Wells. And is it possible that there was a creation and there eternally is a creation both at the same time? The one doesn't exclude the other.
Well, that actually is Catholic theology and has been for about 600 years.
Yeah, sorry. My
Sorry, I hate to break
Catholicism
this to you. That
Catholicism is
is
showing you again.
one of the reasons why Galileo was told to mend himself a little bit, because his view was that there's only one model, the universe, and the Pope, who was not an ignorant man, but incredibly well
Right.
educated, was saying, you don't understand, there has to be multiple viewpoints that are true at once, and the seraphim are God's work of creating the world eternally, not once, as if it was a clock. That's what he said. That's a very old viewpoint.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Again, we've been beating up on Wells a great deal, and he deserves
He
it.
deserves it.
But we're not, I don't think we're reading this just to see how bad he is as a rhetorician and a writer. It's in order to really to expose the project that he's trying to do and to show how much purchase the project, despite its stupidity and its really bad history and bad science and bad theology, how much purchase it actually has had.
Yes, that people
Surprisingly.
just accept this as truth, that they live their life this way and wish to use this project to control the world now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, okay, let's get through this. It seems unavoidable that if religion is to develop unifying and directive power in the present confusion of human affairs, which again is assuming that there's a present confusion of human affairs that has not occurred in any other generation, it must adapt itself to this forward-looking, individuality analyzing turn of mind. It must divest itself of its sacred histories, its gross preoccupations, its posthumous prolongation of personal ends.
it's posthumous prolongation of personal ends.
The desire for
Alliteration, that man.
I know. That's some bad writing right there. Didn't he have an editor? The desire for service, for subordination, for permanent effect, for an escape from the distressful pettiness and mortality of the individual life is the undying element in every religious system. Namaste. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Time
Tell it to the
has
Pope.
come.
And here's the really, this is the sort of the trick that he does, okay? This is the undying element, right? So we're going to replace it with a new religion, right? You desire service, subordination, permanent effect, escape from distressful pettiness and mortality. Come on board, comrade. We've got just the religion for you. The time has come to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax and cabbages and kings. The time has come.
It might need to be revealed.
To strip religion right down to that. And this, when I read this paragraph, I got really kind of cheesed off, because in the Catholic Church, the mother of the church is Mary. So when you talk about stripping religion, that's my mom. Yeah. You want me to hear about what I have to say about my mother? I'll tell you about my mother.
No, seriously, though, look what he's saying. He's saying that religion should be stripped down just to service, subordination to what? Permanent effect and escape from your distressful pettiness and mortality of your individual life.
Yes.
Escapism, subordinate yourself to the common good.
Yep.
Make it last. Serve us.
Right. That's right.
That's what he's saying here. And
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
what so many people in our modern age are asking of you as well.
Recycle.
Recycle yourself.
Renew. Renew. I can't help but notice too that he, like so many other progressives of his ilk, always talk in terms of stripping something, raping something, forcing something, violating something. It's always that kind of talk. I mean, they really seem to be into this whole rape thing,
It's a mindset of people that enjoy war.
apparently.
Yeah.
It's like Nanking all over again, which is a reference there to a Japanese history, in case you're wondering. The time has come to strip religion right down to strip it for greater tasks than it has ever faced before. The histories and symbols that served our fathers encumber and divide us. So get rid of them. Sacraments and rituals harbor disputes and waste our scanty emotions. So get
Scanty
rid of them.
emotions?
Yeah.
Scanty emotions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I know, right? The explanation of why things are is an unnecessary effort in religion. Stop asking why things are in terms of religious things, Find a liquidity in the brain that will explain why you like Susie. Find a twitch in your toe or an electrical impulse that makes you desire to stab your neighbor. Because religion won't do it, right? And once we find out what that twitch and that electrical impulse or that juice loosening in your head is, well, we can give you a pill. And then you'll be, high on Ritalin, and you'll be just perfectly pliable to the great program in the sky.
Louder to snort.
The explanation of why things are is an unnecessary effort in religion. The essential fact in religion is the desire for religion and not how it came about. What?
I know, he's just making stuff up at this point.
If you do not want religion, no persuasions, no convictions about your place in the universe can give it to you. It being religion, I'm assuming, right? If you don't want it, nobody can give you it. If you
Okay.
want it,
Fine, yeah.
you can have it. The first sentence in the modern creed must be not I believe, but I give myself.
Yeah, you see
Or,
that even if you do not want religion, you can be forced to give yourself by a source that's powerful enough. But you won't believe unless you choose to believe. But he says that it should be I give myself, which means it's who holds the power.
right, exactly. Yes. Is it going to be I give myself to science, or I give myself to art, or I give myself to Allah?
I
It's
give
basically
myself
submission.
to the recreation of a social order by stripping people that I disagree with of all that they possess and of their rights and putting them into concentration camps. And ultimately,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one accusation, or like Rwanda, do I just give myself over to tribal warfare and kill my next door neighbor who I've never really liked? Um, One thing that he doesn't at all acknowledge, in the same way that Marx does not acknowledge, is that this sort of thing also lends itself to corruption of the absolute worst order.
hmm,
People denouncing one another in the name of this new religion, when all they really wanted was they just wanted their microwave, um, or they hated them because they mowed their lawn too close or whatever it was. Uh,
or as has happened in many, many instances, because they thought that the other guy's wife was hot and therefore they denounced the guy so that he would be put away.
yeah, seems to work, right?
It
That
has.
goes all the way back to some biblical story.
Yes, I recall it being a certain biblical story. And it's happened in many stories since then.
Yes, it
And
has. Yes, it
even
has.
greater minds seem to be susceptible to that kind of thing.
Yep. Because there's something inherent in us that's so capable of evil, I think, that unless we give ourselves to the love of God and ask for forgiveness, we become real monsters. Um, I'm reminded of that story by Wells, Dr. Moreau,
Yes.
where the story, although to most readers is horrible, I think Wells wrote it as Moreau is misunderstood. that the animals just, they are in the wrong. They are base facsimiles of human beings that are mistakes and should have been aborted. But Moreau was on the right track. So, well, to what and to how are we going to give ourselves over? These questions we will now address ourselves in a future episode, but not this one because I'm sick of Wells.
Yeah, I can only take him in certain doses.
One chapter of Wells is quite enough. Thank you very much.
To anyone who is listening to this in the audience still at this point, thank you for enduring the chapter this far.
That's a lot. And hopefully you learned something.
Hopefully you can see its child that has been birthed within the world that we're in now, which is an unfolding of a past event.
What rough beast its hour come round at last shuffles towards Bethlehem to be born? Yes. All right, Benjamin. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
And to you. Take care.
And you as well.